Hey gamers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and I'm here with a very special video. This is going to be some commentary on our top solo war games list that Brant from the Armchair Dragoons and I made in August. And we have a couple of expert guest commentators on here. So I'm Liz from Beyond Solitaire, but let me introduce my amazing guests. We have Mike from the One Stop Co-op Shop. How you doing, Mike?
I'm good. I feel like I'm the least expert of the bunch, but I'll try my best.
You count. I watched you play coin games on your channel. Don't fib.
Oh, yeah, I do enjoy a solo war game from time to time.
He does. And then we also have Mike from Zilla Blitz. How you doing, Mike?
Great. Looking forward to this. Good morning. Yep.
Yeah, this is actually the first time you and I have hung out, so I'm into it. I'm happy that you're here. And then we also have Brant from the Armchair Dragoons, who's not a solo game guy, but he is a numbers guy.
I've done some solo game stuff. Not as much as you guys. That's not my core shtick, but I've done a few.
Fair enough. So I actually want to start with you, though, Brant, because I want the quick rundown of the process that we used to make this list so that people can kind of get a sense of where it came from, how it was assembled, and what they can expect when they go look into it.
Yeah. So the people that actually know how, survey research and statistics and stuff work will probably cringe and clutch some pearls and whatever, because we didn't try to make this overly scientifically rigorous or anything. There's no way we'd even pass like master's thesis quality here, but that wasn't the intent, right? We were just out having some fun, and so we built a form in Google Forms and kept it pretty simple. We had some very basic questions on the front, including sort of, hey, who are you? And then we asked for people's top 5 solo games. And one of the things that we did was we asked folks to plug in the URLs that linked back to Board Game Geek entries. And that was intentional so that we didn't have to try and parse through like 9 different spellings of people messing up game titles. But then also, like, if somebody just threw in Undaunted, like, okay, fine, there's 5 different boxes that all have Undaunted on the title. Which one are you talking about? And so that allowed us to sort of control which specific titles we were looking for, which turned out to be kind of a big deal. and I think it was very helpful in the data crunching on all of this, because it reduced the levels of madness that Liz and I had by several orders of magnitude. One thing we didn't do, and folks that actually see the list where we've got it published over at the Dragoon site and where Liz has shared it also, is we didn't try to parse between or in any way combine like multiple editions of the same title. An example, there are people that put in the Thunderbolt Apache Leader. I may have that backwards. It may be Apache Thunderbolt Leader. The solo game designed by Dan Verson. Some people put in the GMT version, which has a separate BGG listing from the DVG published version that Dan published with his own company a few years later. We didn't try to combine those or parse those because we didn't want to try and assume intent on the part of the respondents. So if somebody put one in, we assumed that's exactly what they meant, and we left those alone. There was only one place where there was a weird little typo thing, and it looks like somebody just pasted 2 URLs into the same block by accident. But since the second of those 2 URLs was in second place, it was a little easier to parse intent for that person. Otherwise, we went with that. We had people's top 5, and then we treated it sort of like, the polling from college football, right? First place got 5 points, second place got 4 points. We just worked our way down, and then we stacked up by total points. And so if you got mentioned more often and higher, you did better in the poll. If you only got mentioned once and it was in 5th place, you're at the bottom of the list. That's just sort of where things are. We ended up with several hundred, I think it was 500 and something total. I'm trying to scroll on my side screen here. What do we end up with, Liz? It was
definitely 500 plus individual game mentions.
Yeah. So I'm showing 481 different things. Like once we combine the scoring.
Yeah.
So
that's not a huge difference. I would say that just would be in the URL cleanup. We also had 256 respondents, which I thought was really good.
Yeah. We had a pretty good chunk. And then we asked a couple of questions at the end that we made optional. How long you've been wargaming, where you found out about this, how often you're playing solo versus with other people, and how often you're getting together to play in person with other folks versus, not counting things like Tabletop Simulator and Vassal and whatever. And again, like, we're not trying to use those questions at the end to in any way project on the larger wargaming public, because obviously this thing's going to appeal more to solo wargamers. What we were after is sort of, this is describing who the people were that responded to this. So that was just kind of a for fun thing. And that's why we made them optional anyway. So, you know, obviously it's going to be tilted more heavily towards the solo wargamers. The last thing I'll throw out there, and then I'll let Liz take off with this. One of the things that we both saw in a couple of places that was kind of funny is, you know, you made the all 5 spaces to reply to mandatory. I can't reply because I don't have 5 favorite solo games. Maybe this isn't the survey for you. You know, I mean, if you can't come up with your top 25 college football teams, maybe you don't need to be ranking the college football teams as a part of the AP poll. Maybe you need to go do something else. And so if you don't have 5 favorite solo games, why are you replying to a solo game survey? So yeah, we had to kind of rein in the snark a little bit in some of those public responses.
Yeah, although I am happy people wanted to be part of it.
But
It's good that people want to participate. So I'm hoping we'll just see like more participation. The one thing I also want to mention, and you know, both mics, y'all are going to definitely probably have some thoughts about this. As you know, the topic of what is a war game has been coming up a lot. Oh, it's so fun. Everyone's favorite topic. So what we did for this particular survey was we decided to put some pretty as explicit as possible copy that was like, okay, this can be a historical or a war game. It has to seriously engage with history. And then, you know, however you want to define it, because like my definition is broader than most people's, but I want to make sure this was like a very flexible survey so we get more interesting results, frankly. And the other thing was we stipulated that it's a game that you play by yourself. It does not have to have an explicit solo mode. It can be something that you're playing multiple sides against yourself. So, you know, because that's very common among wargamers. So just out of curiosity for everybody here, you know, since we're all doing the wargaming thing solo, how do y'all prefer to do it? Do you prefer games with a solo mode, or do you often just play a bunch of sides against each other? Like, what's your experience like?
I can jump in first. Yeah, I definitely originally, back when I was first getting into war games, which was like late high school, so late like 1990s, that there weren't very many solo options, first of all. So mostly it was playing all the sides. And a lot of the games had like some kind of fog of war. Like I was playing like Columbia block games, you know, and that sort of thing. So I would just kind of imagine that I didn't know, but I'd always have like a side that I preferred, like in Hammer of the Scots. I always kind of made the Scots win, you know. But yeah, these days, of course, with all the amazingly like good options we have for actual design for solo war games, that's pretty much all that I do. I can't remember the last time that I like force myself to play both sides of a game, unless I was like literally designing a solo mode for it, and then it was just kind of for the purposes of that.
Yeah, I think for me, I prefer either's fine. I think sometimes you have 2-player games that just work really well with solo. In particular, I think ones that have like a chit pull mechanic where you're getting some variability in turns and things like that. That can be, I mean, one of my favorite solo games is a completely 2-player game that just it just works so well and it just flows in solo. And sometimes I'd almost rather have that than have a dedicated solo game that has the solo bot kind of as a tack on. You can see this is a multiplayer game, but the solo mode is so popular. It's like, okay, at the last minute, this was kind of built into it. And you're like, okay, but sometimes just playing 2-player is a lot better.
Yeah, I'll admit I prefer a good solo mode over playing against myself on multiple sides, but I'm with you. I'm willing to play as multiple people all in the same game if there's open information. And I also will take that over a bad solo mode.
Yeah.
But I think
feel like there's kind of a fun I feel like there's a fun element to playing both sides solo too, because you almost have to force yourself just to switch your mindset. And that in itself is kind of fun. It's like, okay, I've been totally invested in, for example, in this East Front game and getting the Russians to have success. And then you finish that turn and you guys say, okay, wait, reset. Now I'm trying to do well as the Germans. Okay, what kind of mess have I created? You know, so there's kind of a little bit of a role-playing element in there. For whatever reason, I find that kind of fun too.
Yeah, it's very Jerry's game.
I think for me, like I'm fine playing two-handed stuff where you know you're playing multiple sides, but for those, it's got to be a relatively simple game or lower counter density, because I lose track of what I was trying to do when I switch sides if it's not. So there's no way I'm playing some, mini monster or, larger game two-handed. I'm fine doing more complex solo ones. What I don't want in them is I don't want them to feel like work, right? I want to be having a good time. So I want some interesting and meaningful decisions that actually matter instead of just, roll on this chart to look up where you roll on this other chart to then go roll on this third chart to like move one counter. No.
You're not a real war gamer, Brant.
It's what's funny is I'll be totally fine doing those more complicated procedural things with an opponent across the table from me. I'm totally cool doing that because there's a little more interactivity going on there. But if it's just me like cross-indexing multiple, I can do that at work, right? I don't need to do that, on the game table.
I mean, I think that's probably a conversation for later, but that's another element to this. I think that's really an important kind of filter that we look at these is that the player agency question, how much control do you have over the outcome? Or is it like Brant, as you mentioned, it is something where you're looking up charts and getting an outcome and kind of just generating the story? Because I know there's a couple on the list that I would
dice chucker for the AI, right?
Yeah, and I'm perfectly fine with those as long as the story is good and as long as your mind is in that place, right? There's times where I want to make fun and challenging decisions, and there's times where it's Friday night. I've been working all week. I want something that's going to generate a nice story, and it's not going to push my brain too much. So I think there's places for both, but it's a very interesting filter, I think, when we look at a list like this too.
Oh yeah, totally. And my expression of my preferences is not intended to throw shade on what anybody else likes. Play what you like.
Totally my preferences definitely are. No kidding. No. So actually, though, speaking of back to the list, right? I don't actually want to stride it or only talk about certain chunks of it. So on the Board Game Geek list, I went up through Europa Universalis in terms of the games that I put out there. So that's what people will just see. So about the first 29 entries on the list, and then of course we can talk about other stuff because there will be links to all the data in the top of the geek list, in the show notes here, everywhere. So just so y'all know, like the kind of range of what we can talk about.
Let's be honest. If Europa Universalis had finished 50th, you were going to get the list out to get it.
No, actually, it's because I wanted to go up to 25 and I can't count with all the ties. So it's just to be safe that I can do. I think we could have stopped 2 games earlier, but I was like, I'll just do the extra won't hurt anybody. It's fine. But what kinds of patterns did y'all notice in these top games in that top register? And was there anything that excited or surprised you?
A big one that I noticed, I was actually just running through this one more time before we started recording. I was very curious, as I always am with these kind of lists, of kind of the cult of the new phenomenon. So I was going through all the publishing dates of these, and I won't give away anything specific, but let's see, in the top 20, 1, 2, 3, 3 of the top 20 were released this year, which again, I'm a board gamer, war gamer, specifically going back like 25, 26 years now. And then not even just this year, like another 3 of them were released last year. So it's like almost half of the list is 1 to 2 years old. And that's not that's not a judgment or anything. I think often when I look at like the newest war games, there is, I wouldn't say an evolution, but certainly in terms of like streamlining the solo experience while still giving like tons of interesting choices, maybe covering like conflicts that haven't been covered that much. I think there's like a lot of cool things going on. But yeah, there's only 2 games on the entire top 20 that are older than like 2008, So, and how much of that is the fact that, as we were just talking about earlier, like there weren't necessarily that many games being designed in the war game space for solo specifically. That is a newer, like 15-year kind of phenomenon somewhat. So I think that limits the list in a lot of ways. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of new games on here. The ones that are on here are great that I've played. So it's no shade upon them. But yeah, that was like a big immediate thing that I noticed.
It's so in terms of the list, like we've got all 480 whatever, that full list we've got published over on the Dragoon site. Folks can go take a look at the entire list and draw their own conclusions. We got the list and the scoring over there. So folks can go take a look and decide for themselves what they think actually kind of mattered out of that. And honestly, I think Liz, is probably true for you too. I'm curious to see what other conclusions other people draw that we didn't see, or, you know, in some cases, I'm sure we're going to look at some of the things people said and kind of roll our eyes, but I'm genuinely interested in a lot of things that people might have noticed in terms of patterns and scoring and whatever that didn't jump out at us when we were looking through this. So
Yeah. One thing I'll say though is I actually really, even though there is a bias towards newness, I think that that's fine. It's actually really normal for top lists. And also, I mean, obviously, war games have just been getting better. No, I'm kidding. But what I really liked though was that there was a huge mix in terms of subject matter, approach, weight, and sort of traditional versus more newfangled choices. So, you know, looking at this list, you know, D-Day at Omaha Beach is number one. That is probably in part because it's a classic solo war game that basically everybody has played. It got a ton of votes. Probably because it's something that's in a lot of collections. I'll be interested to see how long it reigns if we continue doing this year to year. But in second place, you had PAX Pamir, second edition. And, you know, it's really interesting to me that there's sort of like a mix, right, of like things that are traditionally considered war games, things that are kind of new wave in terms of historical and wargaming. And they're showing up next to each other on the list. You have in the top 10, you know, Pavlov's House is number 3. I feel like that's probably one of the more accessible ones in the top 10. But then you also have coming in at number 7, Mr. President, the American Presidency, which is brand new. And honestly, I don't know how many people have played it all the way through enough times to be sure that it's that high on their list because it's so long. But, you know, it's been generating a lot of buzz. People are loving it. And, you know, it's really interesting to see, you know, things that are extremely chunky versus things that are pretty accessible, things that are, you know, maybe not as traditional structurally as, you know, war games that we're thinking of, especially because over half of our respondents said they've been playing war games for 25 plus years. Like that makes this data extremely interesting to me, right? Because it shows me that even though you get a lot of internet pushback, our collective definitions of things that are important to consider together are changing.
Yeah.
Based on what are people are putting as their favorites.
To be clear, just one quick note. Mr. President was actually tied for 6th with Enemy Action Ardennes.
Yeah. I'm just looking
points
at
they tied. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll make the same joke I always make and then let Mike from Zilla Blitz jump in here that I've seen the quip a couple of different places online and I still laugh at it that Mr. President, that self-published indie game. For folks that don't know, it was designed by Gene, who runs GMT. And so the idea of it being a self-published game, I just find really amusing. So,
yeah, I think kind of to go back to your comment there too, Elizabeth. That was the thing I think that surprised me most about the list. It's all over the place. I mean, there's stuff that I said, wait, that it's not that traditional war game category. It's floating out on that. You know, if you could argue over whether it's a war game, there's a few in there like that. There's some that totally surprised me. I was actually surprised by the number of older games that I saw, because I think it's kind of going back to that, you know, I've gone back now. I had a 25-year gap in playing war games, and I've gone back now and played some of the older ones. And it's like, oh yeah, we've gotten a lot better now. Just the, you know, a lot more card-driven mechanics. The complex rules are better, graphics are better, it looks better. You know, I've gone back and so I was surprised actually, but you know, like number 11 is Ambush, which is I mean, I guess that says something about the half the respondents have been playing for more than 25 years. But I'm surprised even with that a game like that shows up on the list, you know. So like that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and then B17 Queen of the Skies wasn't far down either.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That didn't make the list, but it's close to the top 20 then, or?
Yeah. It was hanging out down at
Queen of the Skies is tied for 26th.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it made my long cut, but it didn't make the top 20. But that's close for a game that's like such a golden oldie.
I mean, up until you get to like 91, 92 or so, there were like 4 purpose-designed solo war games. I mean, you know, from the mid 50s until, you know, the early 90s, you could legitimately count on 2 hands and have fingers left over how many purpose-designed solo war games there were.
I feel like I almost felt like back then that the solo mode was like embarrassing, maybe. Like maybe there was a little bit of a like, you don't have any friends. Why would we design a game for someone that doesn't have friends? You know, so it just wasn't a thing. even though people, I think, as it's been kind of arisen over the past couple decades, it's obviously.
Well, I think I've been listening to a lot of Liz's recent podcast episodes, and she's talked a lot about like original Avalon Hill and all this kind of stuff. I think since war games were invented, there's been individuals playing both sides. I think what's newer is the like you said, purpose design for solo kind of thing. I don't know if it's ever been embarrassing, like even when they were playing like Gettysburg, like almost 100
that was
years
just
ago.
my
like,
background, right? Maybe it's like,
What's
wow,
your-
I gotta play this by myself.
Well, to that point, I think so. This is a little bit anecdotal, but I also lived it and lived it in multiple places around the country. Just moving around a lot growing up. It was easier to find folks to play with in the 70s and 80s. Up to early 90s for a variety of reasons that we don't have nearly enough time to get into on this show, but you had a lot more crossover still at the time between folks that would easily bounce between RPGs and war games. You didn't have a ton of non-combat strategy games. That Euro game strategy game niche hadn't exploded the way it did starting in the late 90s. So if you were wanting something with a little more heft than Risk and Monopoly, you were playing a war game because there wasn't an option. Like Catan didn't exist, and so if you wanted something a little heavier, that's what you were doing. So it was a little easier to find folks to play with, and then also just let's face it, like there were a relatively limited number of titles up to that point. So it was a lot easier to find somebody who played something you played because the universe of options was much, much smaller. One thing I do think is an important, although we didn't dig into this in some of the questions, maybe it's something to add for future surveys. I do think the fact that more recent games look damn good on the table is something to their credit. And Stuart addressed this in one of his recent columns. I think it was the one on when he was reviewing Herman's Pickett's Charge game, and the title's totally slipping out of my brain right now. But
in magnificent style.
Yes, thank you. He said this is a really good looking game, and that's important because when I'm playing by myself, I want something good to look at. When I've got my opponent to engage with and have conversations with, I'm less concerned with how good it looks. But when it's just me in the game, I want something that I'm not, disgusted by looking at. And so I think a lot of the newer stuff looking good, I don't think that's a factor we should discount.
Yeah, I think that engagement level where it draws you in. There's games you just look at now and just like, wow, I want to move these pieces around. I want to say it's beautiful. And
Exactly.
I don't think that was a thing we had to that same degree, 30 years ago.
And yet we still have, to mention Thunderbolt Apache Leader again, we still have all these like cookie cutter dad bod, like weird looking cards and odd graphic design.
What, you don't want to go again on the adventures of Daddy-O, the pilot? I confess I always pick the ones with the weird names because it just makes it better. Like I just like imagining these like dad bod guys being like copy, like just getting, using each other's names excessively. It's just I enjoy it deeply still.
People may not remember when Dan Versen first started pre-order or pre-publication promotion for what became the Warfighter tactical card game series, whatever. He was soliciting photos from active duty folks and people that were deployed downrange and said, if we end up using your picture in there somewhere, we're going to send you a free copy of the game. And at the time, photos of folks sort of in action, like, nobody stopping in the middle of a firefight to mug for a card picture for a game. But Dan got a lot of photos from downrange because we still had a lot of people downrange at the time. I mean, this was early 2000 or late 2008, early 2009 timeframe, I think is when he first started working on that. And so a lot of those photos or the artwork in those games are built off of actual people downrange. And so that's where a lot of those come from.
That's fantastic. I like that even better now. Hashtag relatable. So here's a question for you. I will confess, I think I might not meet one of my goals of this list was, okay, I want people to get more into solo and historical and war games. I want more people to play them. I'm a little worried that this list is not the most accessible list, that the favorites that we chose are generally a little tough to crack into if you haven't gone this way before. But I think I'm probably just, my eyes are like going towards Mr. President.
Fields of
I don't
Fire.
know. Fields of Fire. Yeah, Fields of Fire is
Oh
in
my
the top
gosh, yeah.
10. So
Combat's
just
in the
big
top
warning
20.
label. Fields of Fire.
I think even D-Day at Omaha Beach is
Yeah.
a game that takes commitment to learning how to play. There's a lot of nuances to movement and things like that too.
But then you have Pavlov's House at 3. That's
Yeah.
a very straightforward, accessible solo game, and it's got like does it or Castle Itter? One of the two has an app, so like you could even find the electronic version of it.
Do.
Okay.
I think they can both be played on Steam now, at least.
Yeah, and then it's
that is I was kind of curious as to why that, because there's 4 games in that series, and I was curious. I mean, the other 3 I don't see there, but Pavlov's.
I mean, I blame. I think we have to talk about.
So Mike, they're all on the list. It's just some of them are further down than others, and I wonder if Pavlov's House having been one of the earlier ones that that one got out a little.
And is Pavlov's House
a little
the
earlier,
one
but
that
it
has
had a little wider pub. So
is Pavlov's one the house that is the Steam iteration too?
It definitely has
both
a
it
Steam
and
iteration.
Itter do. Yeah. Pavlov's House is the one with the 3-part board, and it's got an operational phase, then the Germans, and then the house.
I mean, I think it's Pavlov's House because looking at the survey, about a quarter of the respondents said they got the survey from Beyond Solitaire, and Liz has made it. I don't like Pavlov's House as many. That's like probably my lowest ranked of the entire series. But Liz, I think it's your number 1 or 2, right? And you say that
Actually, I think Landsrath is better. And that's
right,
that's the one that I voted for.
People haven't even had time to buy that yet.
I think it's because Pavlov's House is the first breakout for David, and that therefore it's the one that people kind of latch onto the most. Even though Castle Itter is technically the first game in the series that he designed, Pavlov's House is the first one to come out. It's just had the most time to kind of get its little hooks into people. And
I think that definitely is a theme on the list in and of itself. There's a popularity element in here. The games that people know, the games that have been well marketed and things like that do tend to show up here.
Yeah.
A bit more than some of the obscure ones. Yeah.
Yeah.
With Pavlov's House, let's also not discount the Stalingrad effect, right? Yeah, I mean, it's Castle Itter's some weird obscure thing that's more of a point of curiosity than some really cool battle, or it's kind of this very interesting footnote in the backstory of the Pavlov's House is Stalingrad, right? It's right in the middle of Stalingrad, and like how many Stalingrad titles top the bestseller charts every year, so
but to that point, Landsrath Ridge has
Bulge, and that's the second one of the 4 that shows up in the list. So I mean, there's a as Cole Worley has said in the past, it's sort of genuflecting at the Stations of the Cross of World War II. Like there's this handful of battles that you have to cover, and if you don't, you've done something wrong.
Yes, one must cover the bulge in every war game video.
Yeah.
And I make this joke every time now because it's just come up so many times.
Well, I think that's an interesting point, though, Brent, because as I look at the list, the iconic battles of World War II, there is a strong thematic representation. I mean, starting at number 1 with D-Day, but even going down, the skies above Britain, RAF, Battle of Britain.
Yep.
We got U-boats at number 10, the D-Day Tower. There is that kind of some iconic World War II battle element to here that certainly seems to brought a lot of weight in the results.
Yeah, even the Warfighter that made it in is the World War II one.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I think it is interesting then to look at, especially with this being like a top solo historical, right? That's how it was presented, not war, or was it? What did we ask them to vote for?
Either one. Like it has to seriously engage with history was the limitation.
Yeah, so the ones that pop out, like Mr. President, Resist being like the Spanish Civil War, although I guess that's pretty darn close to World War II.
Yeah.
Resist really surprised me though, because I would think that's almost the least wargamey of them all. It's obviously got a war game theme, but I mean it's a great game. It is
a great game, but it's like a quick little light card game, which is not any of the other ones.
Right. You gotta fit something in around Mr. President.
Yeah. The specific verbiage that went out in the announcement was historical is a term we have deliberately chosen to allow a wide array of games to be considered. Your nominees can be traditional war games, conflict simulations, or games that actively engage with history in some way. A game with a pasted on historical theme should not be included here.
Yeah. Then we got Space Empires 4X mentioned a couple times in here.
I like Space Empires.
It's
But
very
yeah, I mean,
historical.
I honestly, I like
You're-
the way y'all phrase this and kind of how you included games because I don't know. Like, it seems so weird to me to be like, okay, what's a war game? And then you have so many great, like, sci-fi focused, like, war games and fictional, like, fantasy war games that are entirely based on war, used, like, Dawn of the Zeds. Like, that's
Yeah.
the State of Siege system. It's clearly, like, the exact same mechanics. The fact that they're zombies shouldn't necessarily matter. So, yeah, there has to be some way to, like, separate this. And I think the historical is a good way to
Nemo's
do
were
it.
those
Wars on the
games-
list.
What's that? Brent?
Yes. Nemo's War was on the list. But actually there were some offbeat choices I loved. So somebody put Lisboa on the list, and I actually think that is legit in the sense that it is deeply grounded graphically, mechanically, even though it's like a crunchy Euro, in the aftermath of that earthquake. It makes a lot of sense, actually. And then somebody put Obsession, which I thought was very interesting. I think that I would rule it legal. Obsession is interesting because Dan Halligan himself has mentioned he's kind of caught between historical periods. Like, it's not fully and aimed at being an accurate representation of the specific time period, but it is picking up on historical themes and social realities. Like, I personally am willing to hear that. So it was kind of fun to see those things show up.
And can I go back to that quick? Because that is talking about the sci-fi element of it. Was sci-fi excluded from the list, or it just didn't
Yes.
show up? Sci-fi was excluded.
It's a historical games
Got it.
list.
Okay.
Yeah.
We didn't specifically tell people don't vote for sci-fi.
Yeah.
Right. Because I didn't
You
remember
know,
seeing that, but
Yeah.
Or
Obsession,
I'll
we
just
did
be
have
lazy.
3 different people all vote for Obsession. And
Yeah.
and what's interesting is looking at some of the other things that those folks voted for around Obsession. It's not like they were voting for Obsession and D-Day at Omaha Beach or Fields of Fire. They were, Obsession would show up similar to where you expect some of the others to show up with things like McKee and Resist and Pax Pamir. Although we did have one person put both Obsession and Mr. President on their list. It was
That's so cool, actually. Like,
Yeah.
that's a good sign of range, right? That's nice.
exactly. Yeah. So yeah, we did have Obsession show up in a couple of different places. So it's not like it was just one off the wall weirdo. We
Yeah.
got multiple off the wall weirdos.
I mean, I'm pretty sure everybody who entered something in this survey, myself included, is an off the wall weirdo. So it's
Absolutely.
okay. It's part of our bond. So Mike, do you consider yourself more of like a purist wargamer, or do you kind of go off the beaten path yourself? Like, I don't actually know a lot about your gaming habits other than what you post on your channel, so I'm just sort of curious.
Coming at this mic.
I think that's what she meant. I didn't
Yeah,
know
yeah.
either.
Mike,
I was like,
Zilla
I'm definitely
Mike.
I'm not a purist in anything, so it must be that, Mike.
Well, I think my story is yes. I would definitely want to experience a broad game. So I'm digging into kind of crunchy or Euros and things like that. But I think my personal history is there's a 25-year gap. I got back into board gaming and wargaming because of the pandemic. I was on screens. That's a common story. We all hear that, whatever, 16 hours a day, 12 hours a day. I just couldn't take being on a screen anymore. I was even kind of going back, saying, wow, do people even play these anymore? And then I think the first game I saw, oh, well, let me try Sherman Leader was one that I picked up and grabbed that. And that was 2.5, 3 years ago. And it's just, I can't believe how much fun it's been. So I feel like I've got a ton of interest, but there is a lot of catching up to do. So I'm constantly digging back into older games, newer games, but crunchier Euros, anything. I'll go anywhere, sci-fi or anything like that. I just want to have fun playing games.
That's awesome. The other thing I do want to mention about the list before maybe talking about some trends among the people who voted is that if you go all the way down in the spreadsheet to the bottom, there's so many interesting one-offs that I had never even heard of. Like on the solo top list, I've usually heard of a lot of the games on there, like the most, even though you get a ton of like mentions, even if I haven't played it. It's like, oh yeah, I'm aware that this exists. Oh yeah, I'm aware that has a solo mode. But there was stuff that I was just like, what is this? I kind of need to know now. So if you are looking for like kind of recommendations of things you just never heard of in your life, go through this. Just go all the way down to where you start getting like only one person put this. It is so interesting, like how much just stuff there is like deep in this list. And I was really taken with that.
I mean, I think that's a whole second level of conversation because there is a popularity theme to this list. When you ask amounts of people, you're going to get the pop. And I think that's one of the things that defines wargaming is you can be playing for a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. And one day you stumble onto this website and there's 8 games there that you've never even heard of before. This company just pops up out of nowhere because, there's marketing levels are different. So I think there's some fantastic gems that are probably in those one-offs down on the bottom. And I'm kind of curious. I think we had mentioned this before the episode too. I'm very curious to hear what games are the favorites of ours in here that are those one-offs that didn't show up on this list too. I've got a couple that I think I wouldn't expect them to see them here, but they're like, oh, this is a great game. Yeah.
I'm having to look at my own form responses to see what I put because I don't actually remember. I'm
There are
terrible.
definitely some down in the single count mention that sort of threw me for a loop a little bit. I will say just briefly, one of the things you can sort the chart by is we have the list of the count of how many times things were mentioned, and everything that was mentioned at least double-digit times, at least 10 times. Those are all inside the top 25. We only had one that was mentioned a double-digit number of times that's not in the top 20, and that was Falling Sky. So a lot of people mentioned it just lower on their top 5. Everything that was mentioned at least double-digit times is like number 18 or higher. And surprisingly enough, D-Day at Omaha Beach, which came out on top, wasn't the one that was mentioned the most. That was Pavlov's house. Pavlov's house was mentioned 33 times. D-Day at Omaha Beach was only 32. But when you get down to the bottom to some of those one-offs, like only one person mentioned these. One of the ones that I was really astounded by is Empires in America, the States of Siege game about the French and Indian War, only showed up one time in this entire thing. And it was second edition versus first edition. Mechanically, they work the same. It's just the graphical upgrade of the second edition was kind of nice. But mechanically, they're largely the same. I've played that one before. I've reviewed it before. It's a fantastically fun game. You're the French trying to hold off the English and their colonial allies, because we weren't independent yet. And so it's sort of the French, the center of it all is Montreal, and everybody's kind of converging on Montreal. It's a really fun game that does a pretty good job of giving you a sense of what the French and Indian War looked like from the French side. Obviously in the US, like, we learn a lot of it from the English side because that was the side we were on. I was really surprised to see that only show up one time. The other one that was kind of fun to see was when you start seeing OCS games show up on a solo game list. It just sort of throws you for a loop. You're like, wait, what?
Is that Aracourt then?
Yeah. No, Third Winter is in here somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I also want to mention, by the way, we're talking about averages and numbers of times these things were mentioned. Fields of Fire had the highest average in the top 10.
Yeah.
At a solid 4. So it didn't get mentioned as much as the games that beat it out. But woo, do the people who like it like it? It's pretty cool, actually. I'm really glad
that doesn't surprise me. That has a very strong following, but I would think one of the, there's complexity, and then there's Fields of Fire with the solitaire game, and but I mean, let's be nice and say, I think the rules have a leveling up to do, and that's what excites me about the new deluxe edition that's in production. I'm waiting for that. Like, I've got Fields of Fire 2nd edition. I've looked at it. I kind of opened it up and started looking at and I'm like, yeah, maybe I'll wait for the new version.
Man, I did the exact same thing. Twins.
And I've got Fields of Fire 2 sitting in my game room unopened, and I'm like, oh, is the deluxe edition book going to help me with Fields of Fire 2? I hope so.
It is. It
Okay,
absolutely
good.
is. I think you can actually open up the rules. Now they have the rules available in their current. I might be overstepping my bounds here and get this totally wrong, but I thought the rules are available that you can kind of download and try out with the deluxe. But I think there's going to be changes to the deluxe edition that incorporate some of the rules. I mean, I think it's the place to jump into the series when the deluxe version comes out.
And
I bet there's a lot of people that are waiting for that.
Yeah, I'm waiting.
Combat covers a lot of the same game ground that Fields of Fire does, right? It's this very micro tactical, low level man to man. Everything's a card out there somehow, some way, and but it seems like the system around combat is a little more accessible and a little easier to parse the actions from person to person as things are going. And yet combat, despite being in our top 20, still doesn't quite get the traction that Fields of Fire does, or the love that Fields of Fire does. and
Combat's
the
a lot
replays.
newer though, too, right? I mean,
it is a little newer, so
Yeah.
that probably has something to do with it. And it's thus far it's been a little more limited in scope, whereas Fields of Fire covers a lot of ground. So.
Nice. So I want to talk about pie charts. But the first pie charts is one of what's your favorite type of wargaming media content. And like I think this is very much determined by who responded to this, like who would want to respond to the survey in the first place. But people definitely want like reviews, how to play is things that are sort of pre-recorded. They like written stuff in second place, and they like podcasts in third place, which I thought was sort of interesting.
Yeah. I think part of that has to do with the fact that your name is on the survey and it was heavily promoted through your channel. So the folks that are fans of your stuff as pre-recorded video are, that's where they're leaning. So
I would, yeah, maybe.
Although my podcast is so much better than my other stuff, to be honest.
I tossed a poll similar to this up on Twitter, not with as many categories, and on my channel, and the pre-recorded was roughly in the same place. It just dominated the other things.
Yeah.
But again, that could be a nature of my channel too. So
I think it's also, I think a lot of people, there are people who follow you because they like you and your channel. And there are people who find you because they're looking for stuff on a specific game. And I think that if you offer that, especially in war games, because they're harder to learn, they're harder to onboard, I think that people are maybe finding you because they're looking for that game. And if you offered something helpful, then that's what they want to see.
Could well be.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be real. Like my board game media consumption is very much based around wanting to see things on individual games. I love everyone, but I don't watch that much. I'm too busy making it and playing, right? So,
yeah.
But if somebody's got something on a game I'm interested in, that's how I find them, unless it's a good interview to listen to in the car. So
yeah, well, I'm very much the same way. I have time either to make or to watch, and usually in a day. So it's definitely consuming stuff when I want to know something about a game, and I look for it and I find something and look for it that way.
Yeah. Mike, you mentioned the poll. I had done a similar thing through the Dragoons Twitter feed. So I mean, we've got a whole bunch of different Dragoons social media. We've pretty much got our account on just about everything you can have, and that's as much to have somewhere to push things as it is looking for engagement necessarily. And it's more than just me on it's the other thing is that people just assume when they see the Armchair Dragoons label, oh, that's Brant doing something. No, there's other people that have access to those things also from our group that will chime in from time to time. But we don't do a ton of pre-recorded video. We'll do a bunch of live video around some of the live events we do, like the digital conventions or we co-sponsor a online equivalent of a professional military wargaming conference every spring. And so we'll do a lot of live video for that also, but we don't we do hardly any pre-recorded video. And yet even the little Twitter poll that we threw up on our channel last year, the video content still bubbled up to the top. That just seems to be what folks like.
Oh, that's interesting. Because I know there are a lot of channels like yours, and there's a few others where you go in and you'll have a live talk show and there's 50, 60 people in the chat stream watching and commenting, and it's there's a lot of people that really like that format too.
Yeah, we our main, other than the static content on our website, I say static, like not interactive. It's the news and the reviews and the first impressions, that kind of stuff. The next biggest thing that most folks know us for is podcast. And apparently folks in DC like listening to us on their commute, which I think says as much about how bad the DC commute is as, whether or not it's that we're any good. It's just, we're better than the alternative, which is the metro, so.
And I think it's also important on this type of a question, because it's exactly the way I asked it too. It asks for favorite. So, I'd be curious to see if you had a checklist as to say, check all the formats you like. Because I sense there's people out there, they like it in any type. They like podcasts, they like live shows. They're just saying, oh, well, this is a 5 and maybe this is a 4. So I'd rather hear, pre-recorded stuff than live stuff. But it could be very close in their minds. And this type of a poll just labels what their number ones are.
But again, like the intent of asking this question was just sort of trying to get our arms around who the respondents to the survey were. It wasn't necessarily that wasn't the point of what we were trying to ask about. So
got it. Right. Yeah. And I wasn't trying to knock down the value of the question either. I just was kind of saying, we're seeing, favorites and people really might like a lot of times.
I actually think it's a great point. And then the next chart is my actually favorite one, which is the count of how long have you been wargaming. And I think this is such a fun chart because I really did not expect that many people who have been playing for more than 25 years to show up. And then I really thought about like the long life of wargaming and how old our crew really is. Like, not that we're old, but like, you know, I'm 37 and I'm a comparatively young, like among, you know, established war game types. And so but I was like, wait, you know, maybe 25 years isn't that crazy, you know? But do we need to add an extra category next year? And then also, how did y'all read the results of our list, I guess, in conjunction with knowing this information?
I mean, again, 25 sounds crazy to me, and I don't think of myself as an extremely old gamer, but I have been playing war games for over 25 years, you know, so it is interesting that I like just barely make it in there. Like it's like 26, but yeah, well, I don't know.
Liz, you mentioned like, do we have to, you know, level up a little bit and ask, you know, a little further one? Yes, we absolutely do for next time. And I've already said we're definitely going to expand the range on this thing because this is going to sound nutty. 25 years ago was 1998, right? It's not, and you know, there are some folks out there going, it's 98, big deal. And there's other folks out there going, holy crap, that wasn't that long ago. It's like 98 was when I got out of the Army, right?
I was in middle school
after college. Yeah. So I mean, it's, you know, I'm looking at like the stages of my life and I'm going, holy crap, 98 is not that long ago. Like we need an over 40 years question in here, but even over 40 years gets you to the mid 80s, which is like, that's when TSR bought SPI. And so, you know, I mean, it's one of those things that I'm betting that we could put an over 50 years option on here and it would still be a significant pie slice.
Yeah. And what's so funny is, you know, I'm still in the 3 to 10 years. I found a tweet from 2018 and I just laugh at myself. I'm such an idiot. I was like, I don't really identify as a war gamer, but I do sure love all these games about ancient Rome. I'm sitting there thinking, oh no. Like I look back at it and it's kind of like how I didn't know I was going to write my dissertation about monks, but I look back at books I'd had in college and every sentence that mentions monks or monasteries is underlined with some sort of note next to it. It's like, oh, I was telling to myself. I just didn't know it yet.
But I feel like there's a dichotomy here between, you know, the more than 25 years and everything that's not. And I feel like that's almost defining the hobby now. You know, we have these arguments over what's a war game, and we have a significant number of people that have been doing this for a very long time. And yet maybe it's a result of the pandemic, or maybe it's a result of Euros broadening. I think we've also had a lot of fresh ideas and interests and people that are dabbling in Euros and moving into war games. And it's just, I think it's a really exciting time for the hobby. And this seems to almost represent that in terms of what we're seeing in the hobby now too.
Yeah.
I
think you're right.
And I think, there's some sea changes, and I don't know how happy people are about them. Like, I personally love the more accessible games that are like in the historical and war kind of format. You know, like Mike, you had mentioned Resist earlier. Like, that's kind of barely a war game in my mind, but then it kind of is. And at the same time, I hear people be like, I'm never going to play, like this on our Discord or on YouTube comments, like, I'm never going to play a war game. I don't want to play anything that's based on history. Like, I feel weird playing things based on history, which is fine. I mean, it's perspective. It's so far removed from my perspective. You know, like I find more value in these games when they're like historical and I can learn something, or they have like a little like section in the back of the rule book to like talk through the situation and such. But yeah, there's still, even with the increased accessibility of war games, I think they still have for certain gamers, like a stink on them. Like, oh, why would I ever play a war game? That's weird. You know, as they're playing some like 3-hour long Euro they spent $150 for with deluxe like plastic pieces and all this stuff.
You know what, though? The other thing I thought about this data I thought it was very heartening in the sense that in a list where the vast, like over half of the respondents are in the 25 plus category, you still got quite the varied list, which means that the same people, probably at least a large cross section, right, who are playing D-Day at Omaha Beach, who are playing Fields of Fire, those are the same people who voted both Ricky Royal solo modes from Whirly Gig into the top 10, because both Pamir and John Company made it. And that those same people are mentioning things like Pavlov's House and Resist enough, they made it up pretty high. And so I thought that was really heartening, because what it means is that no matter what kinds of like cranky arguments we have on the internet, right? If you're looking at people's actual tables and at what people actually enjoy, you're seeing a really, really lovely mix of old and new. And I sort of see that as really, really good, because I'm not very interested in seeing everything be one way. I like that what we're seeing, right, is a community that is incorporating new things on top of cool foundations.
Yeah.
So that's the read I'm choosing.
Yeah, I think, and that broadness of the list, it's a cool list. I mean, if you are curious and you want to kind of broaden your gaming experiences a little bit, you can look at that list, and there's going to be 3 or 4 games in there that you either for what reason have discounted or haven't really thought it was something you might like. That might actually be a really great experience for you. So I'm hoping people can go into that and find something that'll be, oh wow, I want to check this out, and find something that they really can enjoy. You know, I think that's kind of one of the reasons why we're all doing this, is to help people find really good gaming experiences. And so from that standpoint, I think there's a ton of value for people that will approach that list with, what do other people like that I might not have even heard of? You know, for me, it was PAX Pamir. I was blown away. It showed up at number 2. And for whatever reason, maybe it's just that soft purple cover that I just said, oh, that's not something I would like, or the font or something like that. But then there went $95, and it's like 2 days away from my doorstep now. You know, so,
good.
Yeah.
I hope Decision Games is going to hurry up on that reprint of D-Day at Omaha Beach, because I'm just saying. Hopefully there'll be people. I really want people to look at this list and try stuff on it.
But not just that, like D-Day at Tarawa is in the top 20, 25 or so also. So, I mean, it's that same system, put it in a couple of different places, and Pelalu's a little further down as well. So, I mean, I think the entire series of those D-Day at that whole Butterfield solo, you know, invade from the sea thing, like they're all over. I mean, I think they're all on the list somewhere, just like David Thompson's Valiant Defense stuff. They're all on there somewhere. It's just a question of which one showed up higher.
Yeah. I do also want to say, I saw like the mix that I kind of expected of publishers and designers, but it was still a pretty good mix, and that made me happy too. It wasn't like everything on here is GMT, or like everything on here is DVG. Like you see you see DVG, you see Compass, you see you see GMT, but you're also seeing some other publishers. You know, you're seeing classic designers like Butterfield, but you're also, I mean, like, I feel like we ended up with a very reasonable mix. So if somebody is looking at this list for the first time, and they're curious, what are some of the games from the top chunk, that top 20, that you would recommend that they pick up?
For a new player, you mean, Liz? Like somebody
who plays Euros and knows how to play games, but has not necessarily considered themselves a war historical gamer. Because I think that's who will probably be watching this. If you're brand new, just go play Resist and then go from there, or Pavlov's House.
Yeah,
but
that's I was gonna say, I'm such a David Thompson fanboy, and he's been so good for like the accessibility of the hobby that, and he's a friend of mine, and Liz's.
Well, he's so clearly there's some bias. Right? I mean, you want to help out the nice guy,
right? No, he's an awesome guy, absolutely.
Yeah, David and I designed an entire game together. We still like each other,
But I mean, David Thompson's a pleasant person to be around, so why not?
But out of the top 20, like Resist and Pavlov seem to be the like straightforward. It's not going to hurt you too much. I mean, like the Hunters is not a super complex game to play, but also it really, it's going to go to what you were saying, Mike. Like you need to enjoy the story, because that's not a game that's very heavily choice based or strategy based. And I don't know if a Euro gamer would like that. So I think that's certainly going to be a good game to determine what you might enjoy in the war game space, but it's not going to be a slam dunk, like you'll definitely like it kind of game,
Yeah. I would say that if you enjoy somewhat more complex solo games, but you haven't dipped a toe in like sort of war gamey waters, I actually think Atlantic Chase is great. It's got a really nice tutorial system, and it's very fun. It'll feel special to somebody who likes solo gaming and has tried a lot of different solo games, but maybe not something in this vein before. So I would actually tip a hat to that one if you're an experienced gamer who wants to try something cool. And I would say that if you have not done the historical game thing at all yet, but you do like, say, Euros, or you're used to things like area control, how to do card stuff. I think PAX Pamir Second Edition is also a great starter. You have to play it once, I think, before you fully understand. It's not hard to play. It takes a minute to understand why you're doing the things that you do. But it's worth it, and it's mean. Wakan is a nasty little solo mode, and also playing against other people is delicious. So if you're a switch hitter, I think PAX Pamir is good. What about you, Zilla?
I was kind of falling a little bit in Mike's line there in terms of one of the earlier series I put up on my channel when I first started making videos was about the hunters. And I've seen a lot of people come in, look at that, get that, and then come back and comment and say, this was fantastic. I really love it. There isn't, that narrative generation takes a little bit of the cognitive load off the player because you're spinning a narrative. You're not going to get frustrated by these really complex decisions. The decisions are really straightforward. So there is that one in there. Legion Wargames has a new one out that's not on the list. I'm curious if it made it later, called Aces of Valor, that I would throw even more in the narrative generator. But it's also a very accessible game about World War I air combat where you're controlling a squadron. I think people would find success there as well. I'm curious about Skies of Britain. I haven't played it yet. I know it's meatier, but it also has a fantastic kind of tutorial system that plays you into the complexity of the game from what I've seen of it. So I wonder if that one might be another point of access for people. Yeah, and then I would go back to the Valiant series, in particular Lanzerath Ridge. I think it has some really neat war game mechanics that with, the range of fire, the field, that just so well explained and so accessible, but you're kind of branching into kind of traditional war gamey themes within the Valiant Defense series. So that would be another one I would throw out there that I think is really accessible if you haven't really gone in that direction too.
Nice.
Aces of Valor is on the list. It's in the high 50s. And I don't want to give an exact number because I haven't parsed all the ties up above it to tell you for sure, but it's tied on points with Castle Itter, Dien Bien Phu, Enemy Coast Ahead, Last Blitzkrieg, Liberty or Death, Soviet Dawn, Target for Today. So I mean, there's that's the range in which Aces of Valor is showing up.
Right, and it's less. I think the people who are arguing with that, I'm sure, but I think it's less decision driven than even the Hunters. It's a narrative generator. You've got some few, but it just generates great stories, and it's a fun game to play. It would be a good introductory point, I think, for someone.
Nice.
I will say one of the things that I always go back to whenever anybody's asking about, what's a place to start, the immediate counter question is, what are you interested in? And because if it's somebody that's interested in ancient medieval warfare, I'm not giving them Pavlov's House, no matter how accessible it is. Whereas, if it's somebody that's more interested in, World War II stuff because they want to, learn more about the stuff their grandfather went through or whatever, then, that's a different place that you're going to go. Mike, you made the point, those procedural narrative driven, tell me a story, right? Like choose your own adventure with dice rolling. That's a different type of game that you may want to send somebody to than something that's a lot more counter heavy and pushing things around. One thing that I'm surprised hasn't popped up more on people's radars, despite being fairly highly ranked on here. Navajo Wars, Liz, you mentioned the sort of area control kind of thing, similar to Pax Pamir, or something that a Eurogamer might be more interested in sort of trying early on. I think Navajo Wars is definitely one they should check out. It's got a wide scope of history because it starts with the Spanish coming to North America all the way up through, right before the Civil War with the U.S. So between Mexican-American War and the Civil War with the U.S. As a solo player, you're playing the Navajo sort of fending. I mean, look, the whole classic tower defense shtick is very popular in solo wargaming because it's very easy to procedurally handle the attackers closing in on you. But Navajo Wars, I think, is definitely one folks should look into. And the other thing is it does have a 2-player mode also. It's almost like it was designed solo and, oh, by the way, let's bolt on a 2-player mode, which is sort of the opposite of, and I think Pavlov's House does a similar thing, right? It was designed as a solo game, but there's this bolt on 2-player version that you can do also.
Oh no, it's super deep, deciding whether to send food or not, or send some ammo or not. No, I'm kidding. Yes, it's definitely
well,
it's fine. It exists.
Well, but I think the reason that Pavlov's House ended up with the 2-player mode was so that the more experienced gamer could play the opposite side to help the newbie sort of learn their way through the processes and everything.
I would almost mention that as a way to get in, as well as some of the games that work well cooperatively. as a solo game. One of the ones that isn't here too, By Stealth and Sea. It's one of my favorites. It's a David Thompson game, co-design, and it's got a great, and that's just perfect because you've got three of these little Italian, two-man submarines, and you can kind of each one take one and play that way. Lanzarote Ridge or any of the Valiant Defense, I think would work well co-op too.
Although I think that supports Brant's point about like asking what kind of thing they're looking for even more, because we got like the narrative games versus the more like strategic choice-driven games. And then I would say By Stealth and Sea is a good one to illustrate sort of the solo mindset of get your butt kicked, because By Stealth and Sea, especially like the first couple missions where you don't have like the technology, you just are like almost historically you're going to get destroyed and do so poorly. Versus, it's kind of like there's a video game reference on how much you guys play video games, but it's like the Dark Souls mindset. Like, do you have gamers who want to play really challenging games, and if they happen to win, they feel great about it, but they just got to kind of like survive through terribleness, or do they want to have like more of a shot? And I mean, a lot of the ones we've mentioned, like a lot of the Valiant Defense series, are based on how long can you not die? You're going to die eventually, but how long can you avoid that? Resist is almost impossible. Like almost the best result you can have is like, hey, you didn't really change anything, but you lasted a while. Good job. So I do think, and then
D-Day at Omaha Beach. D-Day at Omaha Beach is brutally hard too, right? That's why I was surprised it showed up at number one. It's like, this is there's so many people that say, I've never won.
Yeah, whereas
solo players like it though.
I was thinking of
there's
another
a certain
D-Day
amount of depth there, right?
Yeah. What's the Liz? What's the In Magnificent Style? But it's D-Day.
Crowbar.
Yeah, like Crowbar is one where it's very difficult not to win. Like it's more about like how quickly can you win and like how great can your results be. But like you're gonna pretty much take those beaches. You're pretty much going to like get up the wall and take down the Germans in that one. So yeah, I think like what kind of experience you want. Do you want to win? Do you want to die? Do you want to like have a super high challenge? That's gonna kind of portion off some of these games for people's too.
The Crowbar is in here. It's down in the 160s or so. It did get 2 people that voted for it. By Stealth and Sea is in the high 100s. It's showing up at 106, but without parsing all the ties, I can't tell you it's the hundreds. It could be tied for 114 or whatever. Three people voted for By Stealth and Sea. So we did have some of those folks that did throw their hat in the ring. Mike Zilla, Sherman Leader is on here. Did get 4 votes. It's in the low 90s.
I think one of the challenges with that Leader series is that I think there's a lot of fans that but there's so many Leader games. Yeah. Most people that their starting points can be all over the place. If you aggregated those, it'd be interesting to see where that Leader series ends up.
The problem is that some of those are just clearly better than others. Let's be real.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yeah, I've played Sherman Leader. That's been my experience with it so far. Yeah.
Tiger Leader is flat out broken and probably should have never made it to market the way it is. There's a couple of things in there that just make the game literally unplayable. You cannot move beyond a certain point in a couple of cases.
But it got votes. Somebody loves it.
It did, and that's probably somebody that either works for DVG or is related to them. There's no other reason to vote for that one. But like the Warfighter series, DVG's Warfighter series as a whole, is it's pretty well represented in a couple of different places. And the aviation series from DVG, all the different fill in the blank aircraft leader ones, whether it's Phantom Leader or IAF Leader or whatever. There's a bunch of those floating around also. But again, if you're more into aerial stuff, I wouldn't be recommending Sherman Leader to somebody. So
I think that point that you made, Brent, that's a really good, because I've seen people that there's an incredibly high level of motivation to work through some of the deficiencies or rule complexities in a game if you're motivated by that topic, and that can make up for a lot for sure. That's a great point.
Yeah. All right, so we've been here in a little over an hour. I want to respect everybody's time, so we're going to move into just a couple of softy questions. And by softy, I mean, do y'all have any hopes or predictions if we do this again next year? I'm hoping to. By the way, Brant, you're conscripted.
I was figuring it. It was fine.
So, any predictions for next year?
Mr. President goes down on the list.
Okay.
Well, because I think it's a bit of the new hotness, but I also think that the further we get from the cutoff time of the action in the game, the further down it's going to go. Like I think one of the reasons it's still high on the list is it's still relatively current. Like this is lived reality for a lot of the people playing it. I think the further away from that we get, the further down it's going to fall.
Interesting. Zilla, what do you think?
I'm just D-Day at Omaha Beach seems to be the gold standard to beat, and I wonder how long that will reign and what could possibly knock it off, because it just seems to be one of the iconic games that draws so much attention. So I'm curious to see how long of a reign it might have. I predict it'll still be there at number one and could last until we have something that just really overtakes it. It could still be there for a long time.
Well, just a quick note on that before other Mike jumps in here. You can see the scores on the overall chart, and so the column with the overall aggregate score, D-Day at Omaha Beach isn't just the top of the list. It is clearly at the top of the list by over 20 points over PAX Pamir second edition. I mean, it's not like it was, a photo finish or something. I mean, it didn't double the next score, but it is significantly far ahead. And then PAX Pamir, Pavlov's House, Fields of Fire are this next little cluster right behind it that all have scores that are pretty close. But then from Fields of Fire, there's a big drop off to Skies of Britain. And so you have a couple of clusters that develop, but honestly, D-Day at Omaha Beach is so far ahead of everything else right now that it may get knocked off of number one, but I don't see it coming out of the top 5 anytime soon, unless all those people just decide to boycott. I don't know if that's going to happen just based on what we're seeing with the score itself. So I
think another element in here too is how, will the pool of people taking the survey get broader? And how will that change? Well, I think that, we may see more crunchier Euros types of things show up.
I was going to circle back around
to my prediction. I think that, well, this may be just an aspirational thing more than a prediction, but my hope, right, is I want people to see the list. I want people to think it's fun. And I want more people to vote next year. But I also think that getting a larger data set will lead to some jumps around in the list compared to this year. And I also think that it will lead to even more of an interesting mix of things that we could see.
Mike, you were wanting to jump in before I hijacked it to talk about D-Day there for a second.
No, it's good. So my prediction, it's a two-parter. My prediction is that my P500 of Red Dust Rebellion, the Mars-based coin game, will finally finish and deliver. That's number one. And then number two, at the same time, within a 1-year span, we will colonize Mars and have civil wars on Mars. So it'll become, historical and current and realistic. And then it's going to be number one. It'll be number one. GMT is going to capture the moment. They didn't even know they were doing it. It's going to be amazing.
I do think Red Dust Rebellion, but that's a separate conversation. The coin series, Fire in the Lake, showed up at 18, right? Mm-hmm. That's the only coin game in here.
Yeah, it's all Cuba Libre down in
25.
Cuba Libre is down here.
All of them are in there somewhere.
Right. I'm seeing the top 21.
Yeah.
Fire Lake
on the spreadsheet. That's all the coins come up, pretty much.
But I do think Red Dust Rebellion has the potential to draw in a lot of people, because I think one of the stopping points for some of the coin games is I don't know anything about this particular topic. Yeah. And Red Dust Rebellion is going to have an accessibility because of that, freeing it up from tied history that could bring a lot of people to the series.
That means that we'll need to make a sci-fi companion to this list.
I do. I mean, there are a lot of great sci-fi war games that aren't here. So,
indeed. Yeah, this is only one subset of really good war games that a person could play.
For sure.
And I think that actually that's part of the fun. I think one of the reasons it's so hard to define war games is because if you're going by mechanism and style, there's so much that you could actually include, much of which is deeply thrilling, actually. We're doing a lot better than people who claim that this segment of the hobby is dying would say. That's my other prediction. I think we're doing pretty good, actually. So since we have to bring this video to a close, tell us all where you can be found online. So Brant, why don't you start?
Yeah, so Armchair Dragoons are all over the place, and that was very intentional, because one of the things that had happened in at other sites that I worked for and ran is that a lot of the attitude was sort of, if you're not here, you're not a true member of this community. And it's that's bullshit. Let's go engage with people where they are. And so We're a little more active on Twitter and Mastodon, and somewhat on Facebook than we are on some of the others. But we got accounts on Blue Sky and Threads and Instagram and like anywhere else we can push stuff to, especially if we can procedurally push stuff to them. We've got a reasonably active Discord. It's not quite as nutty as Fred's Homo Ludens one, but I think that's more of a cult than a wargaming community. I'm teasing Fred. And Liz and I are both in there.
Yes, I will take it over one day.
Yeah. Force Fred to defend against the rebellion. I see how you are. But the main place, armchairdragoons.com, is the main place that folks find us. And our podcast is hanging off of that as well. And then for whatever reason, the YouTube channel shows up under the Dragoon Commander name instead of Armchair Dragoons. And I'm still not sure how to fix that. So that's why it's still like that. But yeah, that's where you find us. And then if you're in the real world, like out in meat space wargaming, look, make plans to come see us at Origins one year. The big gripe for a lot of times was there's no wargaming at Origins. Why would I say, man, I got, 75, 80 scheduled events to the contrary. And this past year was our biggest attendance ever in the wargaming area. And we're doubling the space for next year. So yes. come play some war games with us at Origins.
Beautiful. Zilla.
Mine's pretty easy. It's concentrating on kind of making videos to highlight some of the more traditional war games. I'm playing a broader range, and Zilla Blitz is a YouTube channel, and that's the easiest place to find what I'm creating.
Yeah, one-stop co-op shops, pretty much same as other Mike. YouTube channel is our main focus. I know I should be we have a Discord that's pretty active. That's linked in all our YouTube videos. We have a podcast that pretty much has episodes every week. We have a streaming channel that does some extra stuff. But I am horrible at being active on any social media. Maybe when I quit my job because of my massive board game wealth, maybe I'll start a Threads account and all this stuff. But that seems pretty far off.
Indeed. I know how that feels. And then I can be found anywhere as Beyond Solitaire. I'm mostly a YouTube channel. I also have a podcast. Everything is predictably called Beyond Solitaire. And I am terminally online, so you can find me on social media as Beyond Solitaire as well. But gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on here to talk with me about this list and just kind of, I guess, celebrate that it's here and contemplate what's on it.
Thanks so much for having us, Brant, Mike. Thanks. It's been a great pleasure. And Liz, thanks for organizing. This has been fantastic.
Brant, thanks for crunching the numbers.
Yeah. I needed more mics in my life. So
we got you mic'd up.
we have a couple of different, so the regular co-host for the podcast is also named Mike, and he's the guy that runs the My Own Worst Enemy solo wargaming channel. And so he's a regular co-host, but we've got two other guys with the Dragoons, all named Mike. And interestingly enough, the guy that runs the Solosaurus podcast on solo games is named Michael. So there's just way too many mics in the solo gaming space. One of y'all change your name to Aloysius or something.
Ooh, Aloysius. That is.
We're gonna have to drop a mic. No, I'm kidding.
Mic drop.
And so with that, I will draw this recording to a close. But thank you so much to everybody who watched. Thank you so much to everybody who voted. Please, like, subscribe, comment, ask questions at any of our venues. There are links in the show notes to where you can look at more stuff about the list. And most of all, happy gaming, everybody.